The fifth wave of feminism is here, and it's going to change the world as we know it. My prediction, this is going to be a counter movement to the fourth wave, where women start embracing their femininity instead of tearing down masculinity.
Men come back. The most shocking truth emerging right now is this. After decades of pushing men away, labeling masculinity as toxic, and declaring they didn't need men at all, women are now openly pleading for men to come back and save them from the harsh realities crashing down around them. Imagine a society where women spent years championing independence, prioritizing careers over family, embracing ideologies that sideline men as unnecessary or even harmful, and then suddenly the economy tightens, costs skyrocket, and the safety nets they relied on start to fray, leading to a dramatic reversal where the same voices now call for men to return, not out of genuine partnership, but out of urgent necessity. This isn't just a passing trend, it's a profound shift, revealing deep contradictions in the path society has taken. And by the end of this discussion, you'll see exactly why so many men have chosen permanent solitude over answering that call, a decision that is reshaping everything from relationships to the broader economy in ways few people anticipated. And once you understand the full picture, you'll never look at modern gender dynamics the same way again. For far too long, the narrative has been one sided, with messages flooding social media and everyday conversations insisting that men should step back, that approaching women carried too much risk, that traditional roles were outdated, and that women could thrive entirely on their own terms without male involvement. Yet now, as inflation drives up the price of rent, groceries, and basic living expenses to levels that strain even dual income households, a growing chorus is emerging where women express frustration at the absence of reliable male partners who can help shoulder those burdens. The shift feels abrupt to many observers, but it stems from a simple economic reality. When resources become scarce, the independence once celebrated begins to look more like isolation, and the support systems once dismissed as patriarchal start to appear essential once more. Men, however, having internalized those earlier messages, have responded not with resentment or revenge, but with quiet withdrawal, finding stability and contentment in lives structured around personal goals, reduced stress, and financial freedom that comes from not dividing resources with a partner who previously signaled no need for them. This withdrawal did not happen overnight. It built gradually as men encountered repeated patterns in dating and relationships that left them feeling undervalued, overextended, and exposed to unnecessary risks. Conversations on social platforms show women complaining about men no longer approaching in public spaces like gyms, coffee shops, or social events, with some openly stating that men should take the initiative regardless of past rejections or accusations of inappropriate behavior. Yet those same women often admit to maintaining guarded postures or high standards that discourage genuine engagement, creating a cycle where men see little incentive to try. The result is a noticeable decline in traditional courtship behaviors, replaced by men focusing on self improvement, hobbies, career advancements in flexible fields, or even exploring opportunities abroad where cultural attitudes toward gender roles remain more balanced and appreciative. In places like Southeast Asia, men report encountering women who prioritize family harmony, maintain physical fitness as a norm rather than an exception, and approach relationships with warmth and cooperation rather than entitlement or constant testing, leading many to question why they would return to environments that previously felt hostile. The economic dimensions of the shift are particularly stark and cannot be ignored. Men have historically shouldered a disproportionate share of tax contributions, while women drive the majority of consumer spending, often funded indirectly through shared household resources or male earnings. As significant numbers of men exit traditional employment in favor of entrepreneurship, remote work, passive income streams like real estate investments or digital ventures, or even minimalism that requires less income overall, the flow of money through society changes dramatically. Fewer taxes enter government coffers, consumer demand softens in certain sectors, and the pressure on remaining workers intensifies, particularly in fields that have seen increased female participation. Layoffs hit hard in corporate environments, and with rising costs outpacing wage growth for many, the absence of a stable partner who can contribute reliably becomes a glaring vulnerability. Women who once proclaimed self sufficiency now face the full weight of those choices, realizing that the state support or career ladders they anticipated would replace traditional partnerships have proven insufficient in a time of genuine hardship. This dynamic has given rise to discussions around what some call a counter revolution or even a so called fifth wave of feminism, where the messaging pivots from rejection to reconciliation without fully addressing the underlying issues that created the divide in the first place. Voices appear suggesting that feminism achieved its goals of empowerment and equality, and now it's time to collaborate with men again, to rebuild together. Yet this often comes with an insistence on retaining every advantage gained while avoiding accountability for the consequences of earlier positions. Men observe this carefully, noting the pattern of wanting privileges without corresponding responsibilities, such as expecting provision while maintaining independence in decision making, or demanding emotional labor while offering limited reciprocity. The response from men has been consistent and measured. They have listened to the prior instructions to stay away, internalized them, and built lives that no longer revolve around fulfilling those expectations. In solitude, men discover tangible benefits that reinforce their decision to stay the course. Disposable income increases dramatically without the expenses of dating, gifts, shared outings, or supporting a partner's lifestyle. Time opens up for rest, skill building, physical training, intellectual pursuits, or travel, leading to higher overall life satisfaction and lower stress levels. Relationships, once seen as a core component of fulfillment, begin to appear optional rather than essential when weighed against the peace that comes from avoiding drama, mismatched expectations, and potential legal or financial entanglements. This realization spreads through communities where men share experiences, encouraging others to prioritize their own well being over societal pressure to pursue partnerships that no longer serve mutual benefit. Meanwhile, the broader societal impacts continue to unfold. With men stepping back from conventional roles, industries adjust, innovation shifts toward individual empowerment tools, and cultural norms evolve around what constitutes a successful life. Women who seek partnership now encounter a landscape where men are selective, often preferring to remain single or pursue connections outside traditional Western contexts where attitudes feel less adversarial. The plea for men to return thus meets a wall of calm indifference, not born from bitterness, but from hard earned clarity about what truly brings contentment. Those who built their identities around rejecting traditional masculinity now face the reality that men took the directive seriously and adapted accordingly, choosing paths that protect their mental health, finances, and autonomy. The conversation around these changes remains intense because it touches on fundamental questions of fairness, reciprocity, and long term consequences. When ideologies promote division under the guise of progress, the eventual reckoning arrives not through confrontation, but through withdrawal and self preservation. Men have chosen the latter, finding that solitude offers more rewards than the alternative ever did under current conditions. This is not about punishment or score settling, it's about recognizing patterns and responding rationally to them. As economic pressures mount and social expectations clash with reality, the divide widens, not because men refuse to help, but because the foundation for mutual support was eroded long before the pleas began. The consequences of this widespread withdrawal extend far beyond individual choices and begin to reshape entire communities and institutions in subtle but irreversible ways. Schools and universities, once seen as pathways to guaranteed prosperity, now produce graduates entering a job market that rewards adaptability over credentials. Also, don't forget to check out my review of the movie Idiocracy. It's linked in the description and available exclusively for channel members. Now, let's continue. Yet many women invested heavily in degrees during their prime years, only to find that those qualifications do not translate into the financial security once promised. The time spent in lecture halls, group projects, and internships represented years when alternative paths toward family formation or skill based trades could have been pursued, paths that often lead to earlier stability and stronger social networks. Instead, the emphasis on career first living created a generation entering their 30s and 40s with impressive resumes, but mounting debt, delayed family plans, and a shrinking pool of willing partners who share similar values or life stages. Men who once might have waited patiently now view those timelines as red flags, preferring connections where mutual priorities align from the outset rather than requiring extensive renegotiation later. Healthcare systems feel the strain as well, particularly in areas tied to family planning and long term wellness. Declining birth rates, already a concern in developed nations, accelerate when men opt out of long term commitments and women face biological realities that do not pause for economic recovery or ideological shifts. Fertility treatments become more common among those who delayed parenthood, yet success rates remain variable and cost prohibitive for many, adding another layer of financial pressure during an era when household budgets are already stretched thin. Public discourse sometimes frames these trends as purely women's issues, but the underlying math reveals a shared societal cost. Fewer children means smaller future workforces, strained pension systems, and reduced innovation potential over decades. Men stepping away from traditional provider roles do not cause these outcomes alone, but their absence from the equation amplifies existing pressures, forcing a reckoning with policies and cultural norms that assumed perpetual male participation, regardless of treatment received. Corporate environments reflect similar tensions. Diversity initiatives that once focused heavily on increasing female representation in leadership and technical roles now operate in a landscape where overall workforce participation has shifted. Men who leave 9 to 5 structures for freelance consulting, content creation, e commerce ventures, or location independent digital businesses often maintain or even increase their earnings while dramatically reducing overhead and stress. This freedom allows them to live in lower cost areas, travel seasonally, or simply enjoy more leisure without the constant demands of office politics or commuting. Women remaining in traditional employment face higher competition for fewer stable positions, particularly as companies downsize or automate roles previously filled by humans. The irony appears stark. Initiatives designed to empower one group inadvertently contributed to conditions where the other group found better alternatives elsewhere, leaving gaps that no amount of motivational messaging can fully fill. Social media amplifies these observations daily, with countless posts from women expressing genuine surprise or frustration at the lack of male interest in approaching, committing, or providing in the ways once expected. Comment sections fill with stories of women who reduced their standards, attempted to present themselves as more approachable or traditionally feminine, yet still encountered polite disinterest or outright ghosting after initial conversations. The pattern repeats across platforms: initial outreach from women, expressions of openness to partnership, then confusion when men respond with minimal enthusiasm or direct statements that they prefer their current single status. These interactions rarely devolve into hostility from the men's side. Instead, responses tend toward calm explanations of personal boundaries, financial independence, and satisfaction with low drama lifestyles. The contrast highlights a fundamental mismatch. one side seeking rescue from mounting difficulties, the other side having already built sustainable alternatives that do not require re entering contested territory. Travel and international dating emerge as practical responses rather than mere escapism. Men who explore regions where cultural attitudes toward gender complement rather than conflict with traditional expectations often describe profound relief upon returning home. Relationships formed abroad tend to emphasize mutual respect, clear roles, physical attraction maintained as a priority, and appreciation for provision without resentment or demands for constant validation of equality in every decision. These dynamics feel refreshing after years of navigating environments where compliments could be labeled harassment, financial contribution viewed suspiciously, or emotional openness met with tests of character rather than reciprocity. Many men maintain dual lives, spending portions of the year overseas while keeping minimal ties to their home countries, a strategy that preserves freedom and avoids entanglement in systems perceived as increasingly extractive toward male earnings and energy. Critics sometimes label this approach selfish or defeatist, suggesting men should stay and fight for cultural change from within. Yet, the counter argument rests on observable results. Those who remain engaged in local dating scenes frequently report burnout, repeated rejection, financial drain, and emotional exhaustion without commensurate rewards. In contrast, those who disengage report improved mental clarity, physical health, stronger friendships with like minded individuals, and a sense of control over their futures that relationships under current conditions rarely provide. The data points accumulate through personal accounts, forum discussions, and statistical trends showing rising male singleness, declining marriage rates, and increasing male life satisfaction scores in surveys that track these metrics over time. Happiness derived from solitude challenges long held assumptions that partnership equals fulfillment, forcing a reevaluation of what society truly offers men in exchange for their participation. Economic modeling underscores the scale of the shift. When large numbers of working age men reduce taxable income or exit formal employment entirely, government revenues decline even as demands on social services rise from aging populations and economic instability. Consumer spending patterns adjust as women lose access to the supplemental income once provided through relationships or marriage. Luxury goods, dining out, travel experiences, and discretionary purchases contract in segments previously buoyed by dual income households. Retailers, restaurants, and service industries notice the slowdown, sometimes attributing it to inflation or broader recessionary pressures while overlooking the quiet exodus of male financial contributions. Real estate markets in certain urban areas soften as single men relocate to lower cost regions or invest in income producing properties rather than family homes. The ripple effects touch everything from local tax bases to school funding to infrastructure maintenance, illustrating how interconnected gender dynamics remain even when one side withdraws. Women attempting to bridge the gap face an uphill battle shaped by prior messaging. Efforts to appear more nurturing, domestically inclined, or relationship focused sometimes come across as performative rather than authentic, especially when accompanied by continued insistence on career primacy, financial independence, or rejection of traditional expectations. Men having internalized years of cautionary tales about being used, ghosted, divorced, or accused without due process approach such overtures with healthy skepticism. Trust rebuilds slowly, if at all, particularly when past behavior contradicts present promises. The result is a stalemate where genuine interest exists on both sides in theory, Yet, practical barriers rooted in history prevent meaningful reconnection. Younger generations observe these patterns and adjust expectations accordingly. Boys growing up today see fathers, uncles, or older brothers choosing singlehood or overseas partnerships and internalize the lesson that traditional roles carry high risk with diminishing returns. They prioritize education and feel offering flexibility, develop side hustles early, focus on physical and mental resilience, and approach dating with caution rather than eagerness. Girls witness the struggles of older women and sometimes express private concerns about future prospects, yet public discourse often discourages open acknowledgement of these fears in favor of reinforcing empowerment narratives. The tension between private worries and public messaging creates cognitive dissonance that may take years to resolve, potentially leading to further shifts as these cohorts reach adulthood. Cultural production mirrors the divide. Films, television series, and literature increasingly portray male characters as either villains, comic relief, or optional accessories rather than central heroic figures worthy of admiration and partnership. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. When positive male role models appear, they often exist outside mainstream Western context or in historical settings, reinforcing the perception that contemporary society no longer values or rewards traditional masculinity. Meanwhile, content celebrating single male lifestyles, financial independence, travel freedom, and self mastery gains massive followings, providing validation and blueprints for those considering similar paths. The entertainment landscape thus both reflects and accelerates the trends, normalizing withdrawal while marginalizing calls for reconciliation that fail to address root causes. Religious and community institutions feel the impact as attendance patterns shift. Men who once participated primarily to meet potential partners or fulfill family expectations now seek spaces offering genuine camaraderie, practical wisdom, or spiritual growth without obligatory romantic pressure. Some traditional congregations see declining male involvement, while informal men's groups, outdoor activities, or online communities focused on purpose and discipline experience growth. These alternatives provide belonging without the perceived liabilities of mixed gender dynamics under current cultural rules, offering men a sense of tribe that does not demand provision or constant emotional labor in exchange for acceptance. The overarching story remains one of adaptation rather than destruction. Men did not declare war or seek revenge. They simply followed the instructions given over decades, stepping back when told they were not needed, toxic, or welcome in certain spaces. The peace discovered in that distance proved more valuable than the struggle to regain entry into systems that previously punished their presence. Women facing hardship now seek re engagement, yet the terms offered rarely include meaningful concessions or acknowledgement of past overreach. Without reciprocity, the invitations go largely unanswered, not out of spite, but out of rational self interest honed through experience. This cycle of action and reaction continues to evolve, with each side learning from the other's choices. Men solidify their independence, women confront the limits of proclaimed self sufficiency, and society adjusts to a new equilibrium where traditional partnerships become optional luxuries rather than default expectations. The outcome depends less on dramatic confrontations than on millions of individual decisions made in living rooms, workplaces, and airports around the world, each one quietly reinforcing the direction already set in motion. The quiet exodus of men from conventional societal roles continues to produce effects that ripple outward in unexpected directions, touching everything from urban planning to technological innovation and even the structure of everyday leisure. Cities built around the assumption of dual income households commuting to centralized office districts now grapple with underutilized commercial real estate, vacant storefronts in once bustling neighborhoods, and shifting patterns in public transportation usage. When fewer men participate in the traditional 9 to 5 grind, rush hour congestion eases in some areas, while remote work friendly suburbs and smaller towns see population increases as men relocate to places offering lower living costs, better access to nature, and fewer social pressures. These migrations alter local economies, property values stabilize or decline in high cost urban cores while rising in secondary markets, small businesses catering to single male lifestyles, specialized gyms, outdoor gear shops, craft workshops, and minimalist housing developers experience steady growth, and community events shift toward activities that emphasize individual achievement over family oriented gatherings. Innovation ecosystems respond in kind. Men channeling their freed up time and resources into personal projects frequently gravitate toward fields that reward independence. Software development tools for solopreneurs, AI assisted content creation platforms, decentralized finance applications, blockchain based property management systems, and hardware for home based manufacturing. These pursuits rarely require large teams or corporate approval, allowing creators to retain full ownership and capture value directly rather than funneling it upward through hierarchical structures. The result is a proliferation of niche solutions that empower individuals to generate income with minimal external dependencies, further reducing the incentive to re enter environments perceived as extractive or adversarial. Venture capital flows begin tilting toward these solo founder models, recognizing that lower overhead and higher founder retention lead to more sustainable businesses over the long term. Leisure industries undergo parallel transformation. Travel companies report surges in bookings for extended solo trips, adventure expeditions, and digital nomad friendly destinations, with men comprising a growing share of long stay visitors who prioritize experiences over status symbols. Fitness becomes less about impressing potential partners and more about personal mastery, driving demand for strength training programs, martial arts academies, wilderness survival courses, and recovery focused wellness retreats tailored to high performance single lifestyles. Entertainment consumption patterns shift toward content that celebrates self reliance. Documentaries on historical figures who thrived in isolation, podcasts dissecting personal finance strategies for independence, books on Stoic philosophy applied to modern challenges, and video series documenting real world experiments in minimalism and location independence. These cultural products gain traction precisely because they speak to lived realities rather than aspirational coupledom or family narratives that feel increasingly distant for many. Education systems face their own reckoning as enrollment patterns evolve. Young men increasingly question the return on investment for 4 year degrees in fields with uncertain job prospects, opting instead for trade certifications, online skill stacks, apprenticeships, or self directed learning through platforms offering immediate practical application. The traditional college experience, once marketed as essential for social mobility and partner acquisition, loses appeal when men observe that credentials no longer guarantee stability and that social opportunities on campus often come loaded with ideological landmines or mismatched expectations. Meanwhile, Women continue pursuing higher education at higher rates, creating visible gender imbalances in certain disciplines and amplifying the dating market asymmetries already evident in urban professional circles. The long term outcome may include a bifurcated workforce. One segment, highly credentialed, yet facing employment bottlenecks. Another segment, agile, debt light, and positioned to capitalize on emerging opportunities regardless of formal pedigree. Family court statistics and related legal trends provide additional context for the withdrawal. Men who once entered marriages or long term cohabitations with optimism now approach such commitments with extensive due diligence, often delaying or avoiding them entirely after reviewing outcomes for peers. High profile cases involving asset division, alimony, child support obligations, and contested custody arrangements circulate widely in online spaces, reinforcing perceptions of systemic bias even when individual circumstances vary. The cumulative effect is a form of risk aversion that extends beyond romance. Men structure finances to minimize exposure, maintain separate accounts even in relationships, avoid joint property ownership where possible, and prioritize geographic mobility to retain options if circumstances deteriorate. These protective behaviors, while rational from an individual standpoint, contribute to the broader decline in household formation and intergenerational wealth transfer through traditional channels. Public health data begins reflecting the divergence in life trajectories. Single men who prioritize sleep, nutrition, resistance training, and stress management often show improvements in biomarkers associated with longevity, lower inflammation markers, better lipid profiles, higher testosterone within healthy ranges, and reduced incidence of stress related disorders. In contrast, women navigating prolonged economic strain, career pressures, and social isolation sometimes experience elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep patterns, and higher rates of anxiety or depressive symptoms, particularly when support networks weaken as peers face similar challenges. These trends do not imply causation in every case, but they highlight how lifestyle choices compound over time, with men benefiting from reduced relational friction and women bearing the full brunt of independence when external conditions turn unfavorable. Political discourse absorbs these shifts, though often indirectly. Policy debates around taxation, welfare expansion, housing affordability, and workforce participation increasingly occur against the backdrop of declining male labor force attachment. Proposals to increase social spending meet resistance when funding sources disproportionately drawn from higher earning men contract. Calls for incentives to encourage family formation or male re engagement in certain sectors surface periodically, yet they rarely gain traction when framed as rewards for behavior previously penalized. Grassroots sentiment among men favors deregulation, lower taxes, and fewer mandates over targeted subsidies perceived as attempts to lure them back into unfavorable arrangements. The political center of gravity tilts toward individualism and decentralization, mirroring the personal choices already underway. International comparisons sharpen the picture. Nations with less pervasive gender ideology influence maintain higher rates of partnership formation, earlier family starts, and more balanced economic participation between sexes. Men from Western countries who relocate temporarily or permanently to these regions frequently describe cultural environments where mutual contribution feels natural rather than negotiated, where attractiveness standards remain tied to health and effort rather than contested as oppressive, and where appreciation for provision coexists with respect for autonomy. Return visits to home countries often reinforce the decision to limit exposure as familiar tensions reemerge within days of arrival. These cross-cultural experiences fuel content creation that documents the contrasts, reaching audiences hungry for evidence that alternative models still function effectively. Within Western societies, pockets of resistance to the dominant narrative persist and occasionally grow. Religious communities that emphasize complementary gender roles, traditional family structures, and mutual accountability report stable or increasing membership among younger adults seeking clarity amid cultural confusion. Outdoor and skill based organizations, hunting clubs, woodworking guilds, sailing groups, overland vehicle communities provide male camaraderie without romantic expectations, fostering bonds rooted in shared competence rather than emotional performance. These spaces offer psychological refuge and practical knowledge transfer, preserving skill sets and worldviews that mainstream institutions sometimes marginalize. The psychological dimension deserves close attention. Men who sustain long term solitude often describe a gradual rewiring of priorities. External validation loses potency, internal metrics of progress gain primacy, and the absence of constant relational negotiation creates mental bandwidth for creativity, learning, and contemplation. Attachment styles evolve toward secure independence rather than anxious pursuit or avoidant withdrawal from fear. Emotional resilience builds through repeated exposure to self directed challenges rather than through partnered conflict resolution. The stereotype of the lonely bachelor crumbles under scrutiny. Many report richer friendships, deeper hobbies, and a quiet confidence that comes from living on their own terms without apology. Women confronting these realities sometimes pivot toward introspection rather than blame. Private conversations and anonymous forums reveal growing acknowledgement that earlier messaging oversold autonomy while underselling interdependence, that career ladders plateaued for many at levels insufficient to sustain desired lifestyles, and that biological clocks impose timelines incompatible with indefinite delay. Some actively seek environments, smaller communities, faith groups, international expat circles, where traditional expectations remain intact and men still view partnership positively. Success stories emerge in these contexts, though they remain exceptions rather than the norm in broader urban professional settings. The cumulative weight of these observations points toward an enduring realignment rather than a temporary correction. Men have internalized the lesson that participation carries costs exceeding benefits under prevailing conditions and have engineered alternatives that deliver superior outcomes on their own terms. Women navigating the consequences must either adapt by offering genuine reciprocity and accountability or accept that invitations to return will continue meeting measured indifference. Society, meanwhile, adjusts incrementally to a world where traditional coupling becomes one option among many, no longer the presumed default path for adult life. Economic historians may one day mark this period as the beginning of a new equilibrium, one characterized by lower household formation rates, higher individual agency, decentralized production, and a rebalancing of power away from centralized institutions toward personal sovereignty. Whether the trajectory leads to renewed cooperation or permanent parallel tracks depends on whether both sides can acknowledge the full sequence of actions and reactions that brought us here. Until that mutual clarity emerges, the most rational course for men remains the one already chosen: steady forward movement along paths of self determination, leaving behind systems that once demanded everything while offering diminishing returns. The transformation reaches into the very fabric of daily routines and personal identity in ways that prove both liberating and quietly revolutionary for those who have stepped away. Mornings once structured around preparing for someone else's schedule now belong entirely to the individual, allowing deliberate starts built around optimal energy cycles rather than compromise. Exercise happens at the hour that maximizes performance rather than convenience for a partner. Nutrition follows personal experimentation rather than shared preferences. And evenings stretch into uninterrupted focus on projects that matter deeply without negotiation over screen time, noise levels, or competing priorities. This reclamation of time compounds into mastery over small domains that eventually reshape larger life outcomes. From physical capability to intellectual depth to financial compounding that accelerates when every dollar serves one set of goals instead of being split across conflicting ones. Financial independence takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. Men who previously directed substantial portions of income toward joint housing, vacations, gifts, dining, clothing for two, or supporting a partner's ambitions now redirect those funds into vehicles that build lasting security. Real estate holdings expand as rental properties generate monthly cash flow without emotional overhead. Index funds and dividend portfolios grow faster when contributions remain consistent and uninterrupted by sudden large withdrawals for shared expenses. Cryptocurrency positions, once treated as speculative side bets, mature into meaningful allocations when held long term without pressure to liquidate for immediate relational needs. The absence of recurring date night costs, anniversary obligations, birthday surprises, holiday travel for two families, or surprise medical copays creates a compounding effect that turns modest earners into individuals with genuine optionality within a decade. This financial breathing room translates directly into psychological freedom. Decisions no longer require justification or consensus. Career moves become possible without weighing a partner's stability concerns or relocation resistance. Sabbaticals, gap years, or complete pivots into new industries occur when the internal signal says go rather than when external alignment permits. Risk tolerance increases because the downside affects only one person, allowing bolder experiments in entrepreneurship, creative pursuits, or geographic exploration. The result is a feedback loop where freedom breeds competence, competence breeds confidence, and confidence makes the prospect of re entering high friction relational dynamics feel increasingly unnecessary. Social dynamics shift in parallel. Friendships deepen when they no longer compete with romantic obligations. Male peer groups strengthen around shared interests, mechanical restoration, competitive shooting, overland expeditions, chess tournaments, amateur radio, vintage motorcycle repair, activities that reward skill and reliability rather than emotional performance. These connections provide the camaraderie humans need without the volatility or extraction, often associated with mixed gender romantic contexts. Conversations turn toward strategy, systems, long term planning, and mutual problem solving instead of constant processing of feelings or validation seeking. The absence of obligatory couple socializing removes the pressure to maintain surface level politeness with people one would never choose as friends, freeing mental energy for relationships that genuinely add value. Mentorship patterns evolve as well. Older men who walked away years earlier become informal guides for those just beginning the process, sharing battle tested frameworks for asset protection, boundary enforcement, lifestyle design, and mindset calibration. Knowledge transfer happens organically in garages, shooting ranges, online forums, fishing boats, and hiking trails, rather than through institutional channels that often carry ideological baggage. Younger men absorb lessons about risk assessment in relationships, legal exposure in cohabitation, financial red flags in partner selection, and the value of building a life that does not collapse when one person leaves. This informal transmission preserves hard won wisdom that mainstream culture sometimes dismisses or actively discourages. Health behaviors improve measurably in many cases. Sleep hygiene becomes non negotiable when nobody else controls the bedroom environment. Recovery from training sessions happens fully because rest is not interrupted by late night discussions or emotional labor. Nutrition aligns with performance goals rather than accommodating cravings or convenience eating for two. Preventive care receives consistent attention because long term health directly impacts personal autonomy rather than serving as a shared resource to be drawn upon. Mental health practices, meditation, journaling, breath work, cold exposure integrate seamlessly into routines without needing to explain their purpose or defend their time allocation. The net effect is often a physique and vitality level that would have required extraordinary effort to maintain under constant relational demands. Creative output frequently surges. Writing, music production, woodworking, coding side projects, photography, or any pursuit requiring sustained focus benefits enormously from the elimination of interruptions and competing emotional priorities. Men report finishing novels started years earlier, releasing albums recorded in home studios, launching YouTube channels documenting their journeys, building custom furniture lines sold online, or developing open source tools that gain adoption in their fields. The common thread is uninterrupted deep work married to financial stability that removes the pressure to monetize immediately. Art created under these conditions often carries an authenticity and intensity that resonates with audiences facing similar questions about purpose and direction. Spirituality or philosophical inquiry deepens for many. Without the constant pull of relational drama, space opens for contemplation of larger questions: meaning, mortality, legacy, ethics, the nature of power, the structure of reality. Some return to religious traditions with fresh eyes, seeking frameworks that emphasize personal responsibility and moral clarity rather than therapeutic platitudes. Others explore secular philosophies, Stoicism, existentialism, objectivism, perennialism, finding resonance in systems that place individual agency at the center. Meditation retreats, silent Vipassana courses, solo wilderness time, or disciplined reading schedules become regular practices rather than occasional luxuries. The result is often a grounded certainty about core values that makes external attempts at manipulation or guilt induction far less effective. Parenting, when it occurs, takes on a different character. Men who choose fatherhood later in life or through non traditional paths bring maturity, financial security, and emotional stability that younger versions of themselves rarely possessed. Those who remain child free invest energy in mentoring nephews, coaching youth teams, supporting community programs, or contributing to causes that benefit the next generation without the full obligations of direct parenthood. The absence of rushed family formation allows deliberate choice rather than default progression, leading to higher intentionality when children do enter the picture. Environmental awareness sometimes increases. Men living alone tend to consume fewer resources per person than dual occupancy households. Smaller living spaces, less food waste, fewer vehicle miles when commuting disappears, lower overall carbon footprint from reduced discretionary travel for couple activities. Minimalist tendencies emerge naturally when acquisition serves function rather than signaling or appeasement. Sustainable practices, gardening, composting, solar installations, rainwater collection become practical experiments rather than ideological statements, often driven by cost savings and self reliance rather than virtue signaling. Technological adoption accelerates in service of autonomy. Home automation systems optimize single person environments for efficiency and comfort. AI tools handle administrative drudgery, freeing hours for high value activities. Virtual reality provides immersive experiences without travel costs or social obligations. Decentralized platforms for finance, communication, and content distribution reduce dependence on centralized gatekeepers perceived as increasingly hostile to independent male voices. The toolkit for personal sovereignty expands rapidly because the user base investing in these technologies grows steadily among those who have already exited traditional systems. Cultural memory begins to shift. Stories of men who walked away and built meaningful lives circulate as counter narratives to the dominant message that singleness equals failure. Biographies of historical figures who thrived in solitude, philosophers, inventors, explorers, artists, gain renewed attention. Contemporary examples emerge in public view. Entrepreneurs who scaled businesses while remaining deliberately single, adventurers documenting extreme self sufficiency, creators producing high quality work without romantic subplots dominating their personal brand. These examples normalize paths previously framed as deviant or tragic, providing templates for younger men questioning the default script. The contrast with women still embedded in conventional expectations grows sharper over time. Those who doubled down on careerism, delayed family formation, embraced maximal independence rhetoric, and maintained high relational standards now face a market where the most capable and self directed men have largely exited. Attempts to recalibrate, lowering visible demands, adopting softer aesthetics, signaling openness to provision, often meet polite neutrality rather than enthusiasm. The explanation lies not in malice, but in arithmetic. When men calculate that re engagement carries higher downside risk and lower upside reward than continuing on their current trajectory, rational choice prevails. Trust, once broken through repeated messaging that men were optional at best and toxic at worst, does not rebuild overnight simply because circumstances have changed for one party. This stalemate forces uncomfortable questions onto society as a whole. If large numbers of productive men prefer solitude to participation, what does that say about the incentives currently on offer? If economic systems depend heavily on male taxable labor and consumer contributions routed through women, how sustainable is the model when that flow diminishes? If cultural narratives continue celebrating female independence while quietly assuming male provision will always return when needed, what happens when it does not? The answers emerge not through manifestos or protests, but through millions of individual decisions accumulating into structural change. Eventually, the trajectory may stabilize into a new normal where lifelong singlehood for men becomes as unremarkable as dual earner childless couples once were. Partnership survives as an option chosen by those who find genuinely compatible matches offering mutual benefit rather than default obligation. Children arrive to parents who actively want them rather than those following social scripts. Economic power decentralizes further as individuals rather than households drive consumption and investment. Cultural production reflects this diversity of life paths instead of privileging one model above others. Until that equilibrium arrives, the path remains clear for those who have already chosen it. Forward motion continues along lines of self mastery, resource accumulation, meaningful contribution on chosen terms, and unapologetic prioritization of personal peace. The invitation to return exists, yet it arrives addressed to men who no longer live at the old address. They have moved, built new structures, and found the view from there worth keeping. The momentum behind this individual level redesign of life carries forward into broader arenas where the absence of men from expected roles begins to expose structural weaknesses that were previously masked by routine compliance. Public infrastructure funding, long dependent on consistent tax inflows from high-earning male workers, starts showing visible strain in deferred maintenance projects, delayed transit expansions, and scaled back community programs that once relied on surplus revenue nobody questioned. Municipal budgets that assumed perpetual growth in wage tax collections now confront flat or declining receipts, forcing difficult conversations about service cuts, rate increases, or new revenue streams that prove politically contentious when the demographic contributing the largest share has quietly reduced its footprint. School districts in affluent suburbs notice enrollment dips as families form less frequently, leading to classroom consolidations, teacher layoffs, and facility underuse that ripple into local property tax debates. The fiscal architecture built around the two-income nuclear family model begins to creak when one of its primary engines operates at partial capacity. Energy markets register parallel adjustments. Single occupancy households typically require less overall power for heating, cooling, lighting, and appliance use compared with multi-person dwellings, especially when those households prioritize efficiency and minimalism. Aggregate residential demand softens in regions where men have relocated en masse to lower density areas or adopted off grid capable setups powered by solar arrays and battery storage. Utility companies that once banked on steady load growth revise forecasts downward, delaying capital intensive generation projects and accelerating investment in distributed energy resources that suit decentralized living patterns. The shift favors technologies that reward individual control. Smart inverters, home energy management systems, vehicle to grid integration for those who keep electric trucks or vans as work platforms, over centralized mega projects that assumed population density and household size would remain constant. Insurance industries recalibrate risk models in response. Life insurance actuaries note that men who maintain disciplined fitness regimens, avoid high conflict relationships, and eliminate certain lifestyle stressors show lower morbidity and mortality curves than historical averages for their age cohorts. Premium structures begin reflecting these divergences, offering more favorable rates to applicants demonstrating long-term singlehood paired with objective health markers. Property and casualty lines observe reduced claims frequency in dwellings occupied by one highly organized adult compared with multi-person households prone to coordination failures, accidental damage, or interpersonal disputes that escalate into covered losses. The data quietly challenges assumptions baked into pricing that treated couplehood and family life as inherently stabilizing rather than occasionally destabilizing factors. Automotive trends pivot accordingly. Pickup trucks and overland capable SUVs see sustained demand from men equipping vehicles for solo expeditions, mobile workspaces, or weekend escapes to remote public lands. Sedans and crossovers marketed toward family hauling lose relative market share, while adventure-oriented brands emphasize payload capacity, ground clearance, roof tent compatibility, and auxiliary power outlets that support off-grid living. Electric vehicle adoption among this demographic accelerates when models offer sufficient range for cross-country travel without frequent charging stops that disrupt solitary itineraries. Aftermarket industries thrive around custom builds, auxiliary fuel tanks, solar-powered fridges, rooftop storage solutions, winch kits, recovery gear that turn transportation into an extension of personal sovereignty rather than a compromise shaped by shared use. Food systems adapt to smaller average household sizes. Grocery chains expand sections dedicated to single-serve proteins, pre-portioned vegetables, meal kits optimized for one, and high-quality frozen ingredients that minimize waste. Farmers markets notice increased male shoppers prioritizing nutrient density and preparation simplicity over bulk family quantities. Direct-to-consumer meat subscriptions and regenerative agriculture deliveries gain traction among men who value traceability, cost per gram of protein, and freedom from weekly shopping routines dictated by another person's schedule or tastes. Home cooking evolves toward batch preparation methods that store well for sequential consumption, reducing both time spent in the kitchen and money lost to spoiled leftovers from mismatched meal planning. Fashion and grooming industries register the change through subtler channels. Men invest more consistently in durable, functional clothing, rugged outerwear, technical fabrics, minimalist footwear that serves multiple contexts without needing to signal status within a relationship. Grooming products shift toward performance driven formulations. High SPF daily moisturizers for outdoor exposure. Beard oils formulated for frequent training sweat. Multi use balms that double as hair and skin treatments. The emphasis moves from impressing observers to maintaining personal standards that support long term health and capability. Luxury segments, once reliant on gift giving occasions, contract, while evergreen categories tied to self maintenance expand steadily. Real estate development patterns begin reflecting these preferences. Developers in secondary and tertiary markets introduce more studio and one-bedroom units with robust home office capabilities, private outdoor space, and community amenities geared toward individual pursuits, maker spaces, private gyms, secure storage for adventure gear, high-speed internet redundancy, rather than playgrounds or family pools. Co-living arrangements marketed toward young professionals give way to purpose-built single occupancy buildings that offer hotel-like services without shared kitchens or mandatory socializing. Rural and ex-urban areas see renewed interest in properties with acreage suitable for small-scale food production, shooting ranges, or workshop barns, drawing men who want physical separation from urban ideological currents while retaining digital connectivity. Media consumption habits solidify around platforms and formats that reward sustained attention rather than fragmented couple negotiation. Long form podcasts dissecting history, economics, technology, and personal optimization dominate listening queues because they require no interruption or consensus on episode selection. Documentary series exploring human achievement, wilderness survival, engineering marvels, and philosophical inquiry stream without debate over genres or runtime. Reading lists tilt toward dense nonfiction, biographies of self reliant figures, treatises on systems thinking, technical manuals for mechanical or digital crafts that build cumulative knowledge rather than providing light escapism. The attention economy responds by producing more content calibrated to solitary deep focus, sidelining formats that assume group viewing or constant emotional processing. Language itself begins to evolve in private conversations and online subcultures. Terms once used pejoratively, simmer, bachelor, lone wolf, reclaim neutral or positive valence as descriptors of deliberate choice rather than default failure. Phrases that emphasize ownership of outcomes, my house, my rules, my time, my money, my peace, circulate as mantras that reinforce boundaries. Acronyms and shorthand emerge to describe the philosophy succinctly. MWA itself becomes a recognizable marker of a worldview centered on walking away from systems that demand unreciprocated sacrifice. The lexicon grows organically because lived experience generates concepts that existing vocabulary inadequately captures. Legal strategies grow more sophisticated among those committed to the path. Trusts, LLCs, and irrevocable structures shield assets from potential future claims. Prenuptial style agreements, when rare partnerships do form, become ironclad and reviewed annually. Residency choices factor in jurisdiction differences regarding common law marriage, palimony, and equitable distribution. Digital privacy practices harden. Encrypted communication, separate financial accounts, minimal social media footprint to reduce exposure to discovery requests or doxing attempts from disgruntled parties. The cumulative effect is a defensive architecture designed to preserve gains accumulated through disciplined independence. Philanthropy takes on a different character. Donations flow toward causes that align with personal values. Veterans organizations supporting male mental health, trade school scholarships for young men, wilderness conservation efforts, boys mentoring programs, rather than broad institutional charities that often carry ideological overlays. Direct support to individuals within chosen networks replaces large anonymous gifts, creating tighter feedback loops and greater perceived impact. The motivation stems less from tax strategy and more from a desire to reinforce the principles that enabled personal success: self reliance, competence, mutual respect among capable adults. The cumulative weight of these adaptations begins to normalize what was once considered fringe. Neighborhoods once defined by identical two-car garages and swing sets now include homes with workshop extensions, rooftop observatories, or converted garages serving as private gyms and studios. Conversations at local hardware stores turn toward project logistics rather than family logistics. Coffee shops see more men working solo with laptops open to trading screens, CAD programs, or writing interfaces instead of scrolling dating apps or coordinating schedules. The visual landscape of everyday life slowly reflects the underlying demographic reality. Fewer strollers, fewer minivans, fewer coordinated family outfits, more individuals moving with purpose on their own terms. Critics who remain invested in the older model sometimes frame the shift as societal decline or male immaturity. Yet the observable outcomes, higher personal savings rates, improved health metrics, increased creative production, stronger same sex friendships, greater civic contribution on chosen terms, contradict narratives of regression. The data tells a different story. Men who exit high conflict systems do not collapse into dysfunction. They frequently level up in ways that benefit themselves and, indirectly, the broader fabric through innovation, reduced resource strain, and preserved dignity. The charge of selfishness loses force when weighed against the alternative of continued participation in arrangements that extract value while eroding self respect. Eventually, the question becomes not whether men will return en masse, they will not, but how society reorganizes around the reality that a significant cohort now treats partnership as elective rather than obligatory. Economic incentives may adjust through tax policy tweaks, housing design changes, cultural messaging pivots, or workplace flexibility expansions that make participation more appealing without coercion. Cultural narratives may evolve to celebrate diverse life paths equally rather than privileging one above others. Or the parallel tracks may simply coexist. One lane continuing the traditional script for those who find it rewarding, another lane supporting sovereign individuals who find fulfillment elsewhere. In either case, the decision rests with those who already walked. They have tested the alternative hypothesis that life without obligatory relational entanglement could deliver superior outcomes and found confirmation in bank balances, body composition, sleep scores, project completions, passport stamps, and the simple daily experience of waking without dread. That evidence forms the foundation for continued forward motion. The path narrows to a single track because every competing route has already been measured and found wanting under present conditions. Peace, once an abstract hope, becomes the baseline against which all future invitations are judged. And so the journey continues, one deliberate step at a time toward horizons shaped entirely by personal choice. The long arc of this transformation finally settles into a quiet certainty that no longer requires explanation or defense to anyone outside the frame of personal experience. Men who once measured worth through external markers, relationship status, social approval, professional titles tied to corporate ladders, now calibrate success against internal benchmarks that prove far more reliable over time. Net worth tracked monthly without apology, body fat percentage held steady through disciplined consistency. Skill inventories expanded deliberately across domains from welding to algorithmic trading to wilderness navigation. Hours logged in deliberate practice rather than performative busyness. These metrics accumulate into a form of wealth that compounds silently and resists seizure or dilution. The absence of a partner becomes not a deficit, but a structural feature of the design, like reinforced foundations in a building meant to withstand storms, rather than share load with unreliable tenants. This internal recalibration reshapes how time itself is experienced. Days stretch with purposeful density instead of being fragmented by constant micro negotiations. A single hour of focused reading on monetary history or mechanical engineering yields insights that compound across years, unfiltered by someone else's attention span or ideological objections. Weekends transform from obligatory couple errands into laboratories for experimentation, testing new resistance training protocols, dialing in espresso variables with a precision grinder, mapping untracked Forest Service roads on topographic overlays, rebuilding carburetors from 1970s Japanese motorcycles acquired for parts value alone. The rhythm feels orchestral rather than reactive because every beat serves one conductor. Boredom, once feared as the shadow side of solitude, rarely appears when curiosity drives the schedule and resources exist to chase it without permission slips. Relationships with family of origin evolve in unexpected directions. Parents who once pressed for grandchildren or stable partnerships gradually adjust expectations when they observe sustained well being instead of the predicted collapse into loneliness. Visits become voluntary exchanges of value, helping with home repairs, sharing investment research, cooking meals that respect dietary preferences, rather than obligatory performances laced with subtle guilt induction. Siblings notice the shift and sometimes adopt elements of the approach themselves, quietly reducing exposure to high risk romantic entanglements while building parallel buffers. The family unit persists, but on terms that respect individual sovereignty rather than enforcing collective scripts about what adulthood must look like. Community involvement takes forms that align with personal strengths rather than social expectations. Volunteer fire departments gain capable members who show up reliably for training and calls because the work offers tangible competence feedback without emotional overhead. Search and rescue teams benefit from men who have already cultivated wilderness skills, physical conditioning, and calm under pressure through years of self directed challenges. Local makerspaces fill with individuals machining precision parts, printing functional prototypes, forging blades, or coding embedded systems for personal automation projects. These contributions flow from abundance rather than obligation, creating goodwill that feels earned rather than extorted through relational leverage. The concept of legacy reframes itself away from biological descendants toward transmitted capability and preserved knowledge. Men document processes, detailed build logs for off grid solar setups, spreadsheets dissecting real estate cash flow models, annotated reading lists that trace intellectual lineages from classical Stoics to modern heterodox economists, and make them available through private discords, encrypted repositories, or small paid communities that value signal over noise. Younger men encountering these resources treat them as cheat codes for accelerating independence rather than waiting for institutional gatekeepers to approve their path. The transmission happens peer to peer, mentor to apprentice style, bypassing mainstream channels that often dilute or censor content perceived as threatening to prevailing gender narratives. Risk perception sharpens dramatically. What once appeared as normal life hazards, cohabitation without ironclad legal protection, joint bank accounts, verbal promises of forever, now register as high probability downside events carrying asymmetric consequences. Men develop mental models that treat relational entry as a form of leveraged speculation, high potential return, but catastrophic tail risk if counterparties change terms mid game. Exit costs, legal entanglements, reputational damage from false accusations, financial hemorrhage through prolonged proceedings, all factor into a cold cost benefit equation that rarely balances in favor of participation under current rules. The default position becomes maintenance of optionality rather than premature commitment, preserving maneuverability in an environment where incentives remain misaligned. Global mobility emerges as both strategy and philosophy. Passports accumulate stamps from countries where rule of law still respects property rights, taxation remains reasonable, and cultural attitudes toward male provision carry appreciation rather than suspicion. Digital nomad visas in Portugal, Estonia, Malaysia, Panama, and Costa Rica become practical tools for men who structure income through remote consulting, dividend streams, or online businesses that follow them anywhere with reliable internet. The ability to relocate within weeks rather than years decouples personal well being from local cultural decay or economic mismanagement. When headlines report another round of corporate layoffs disproportionately affecting remaining male professionals, or fresh legislation expanding spousal claims on separate property, the response is logistical rather than emotional. Book the flight, transfer the accounts, continue the routine elsewhere with minimal disruption. This mobility reinforces a form of psychological anti-fragility. Exposure to varied legal systems, currencies, climates, cuisines, and social norms builds resilience that static residency rarely provides. Men learn to thrive in environments where they hold no historical baggage, no ex-partners with lingering grievances, no family court jurisdiction waiting to activate. The repeated act of starting fresh in new locations trains the nervous system to treat change as opportunity rather than threat, reducing attachment to any single place or social circle. Home becomes the internal operating system, discipline, competence, resource control, rather than a fixed address or sentimental structure. The aesthetic dimension of life receives deliberate attention once external validation drops away. Living spaces reflect function elevated to beauty. Clean lines, durable materials, purposeful lighting, acoustic treatment for focused work or music listening, ergonomic setups that prevent repetitive strain injuries during long coding or trading sessions. Wardrobes distill to versatile, high quality pieces that transition seamlessly from trail to boardroom to formal dinner without signaling desperation for approval. Grooming routines become rituals of self respect. Straight razor shaves, quality skincare formulations, disciplined hair maintenance, executed for the mirror rather than an audience. The cumulative effect creates an environment that quietly communicates mastery over details most people neglect. Intellectual curiosity often turns toward subjects once considered peripheral or taboo within polite company. Evolutionary psychology, game theory applied to mating markets, historical patterns of civilizational rise and fall, monetary debasement cycles, the mechanics of propaganda through institutional capture, all receive sustained scrutiny because understanding root causes reduces surprise when surface level narratives collapse. Reading becomes voracious and cross disciplinary, connecting dots between Austrian economics, classical military strategy, behavioral biology, and cryptographic security models. The goal is not credential accumulation, but predictive power, the ability to anticipate institutional behavior, cultural shifts, economic turning points, and personal risk vectors with greater accuracy than those who remain inside echo chambers. Physical capability serves as both metric and metaphor for the entire project. Strength numbers, climbed methodically through progressive overload, become proxies for discipline applied across domains. Cardiovascular base, built through rucking heavy loads over uneven terrain, mirrors the endurance required to outlast societal pressures. Grip strength, maintained through dead hangs and thick bar training, symbolizes refusal to let go of hard won position. Flexibility preserved through consistent mobility work counters the stiffness that creeps into bodies subjected to chronic relational stress. The gym, or garage lifting platform, turns into a daily proving ground where excuses have nowhere to hide and progress arrives solely through applied effort. The final layer of this architecture involves radical acceptance of outcomes already set in motion. Attempts at large scale cultural reversal or mass male re engagement fade into background noise because they require coordinated action that contradicts the very individualism driving the shift. Instead, the focus remains micro level, perfecting one's own system, hardening defenses, expanding optionality, transmitting useful knowledge to those who ask sincerely. The collective impact emerges as emergent order rather than central planning. Millions of men, operating on aligned principles, produce structural change without needing to march, petition, or negotiate with institutions that long ago stopped listening. Society may eventually adapt by lowering expectations of male participation, redesigning incentives around voluntary contribution, normalizing singlehood as a high status life path, or creating parallel institutions that respect male agency rather than seeking to harness it. Or it may continue along the current trajectory until pressure forces a reckoning that no amount of messaging can prevent. Either way, the men who walked away have already secured their position outside the blast radius. They operate in a world of their own construction where peace is the baseline, competence the currency, freedom the architecture, and forward motion the only direction that still makes sense. The story does not end with triumph or tragedy because it never truly concludes. It simply continues as a sequence of deliberate choices made in full awareness of trade offs already measured and accepted. Each day adds another layer to the structure, another dollar invested, another pound lifted, another skill acquired, another horizon reached, and the result stands as quiet testimony to what becomes possible when obligation gives way to ownership. Shout out to the 1 hour gang who stayed locked in until the very end. If these angry guy breakdowns resonate with you and you want more of this unfiltered clarity, show some support by grabbing me a Red Bull through the link in the description. It keeps the engine running. Drop a comment below and tell me what hit hardest today. Do you see the same patterns playing out around you? Do you agree with the direction this is heading? Share your thoughts straight, no filter needed. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing, nothing, nothing. nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.